Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another Transformers TCG meta analysis. Anthony joining you once again, and Encounter 1 is now in the book. Season 2 is officially in full swing, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about out of Encounter 1. A lot of interesting meta changes have happened, especially when you look at what was running around in the OI. So enough with the intro, let's get started with discussing this. So last time, we started by talking about how the top 3 decks from the OI, of course Galaxy Prime, Metroplex, and Devastator, were likely going to do with Wave 8 now in the picture, and too long didn't read, I thought all of them were going to show up and make a run in Top Cut. However, that was very much not the case, as Metro and Galaxy were nowhere to be seen, and Devi only had one appearance, played by yours truly, and it got 15th place out of 16. Now, the deck I was playing was a bit more unconventional compared to previous builds I've played, as it was a more black-heavy shell, while main decking Scorpulator in place of Mixmaster, and could side into the ladder if combining was needed, and it still played like Devastator usually does throughout the event. But even in the first round, which for me was against the eventual champion of the event in Stephen Moss, a new part of Devastator theory emerged. You have to be able to read the meta effectively in order to have success with him. For context, I went 2-3 this event, winning against Predaking and Sunstorm while losing to 5-Wide Good Stuff, the deck that eventually won the event, alongside Bill's Red Wizard nonsense he ported over, I can speak, from losers, and Abominus. And while the Abominus matchup could have gone either way, the other two were absolute blowouts against me, and both those decks featured a lot or all characters with 9 or 10 health that were running blue or ran enough blues to cause problems. Because of this, we now have a good idea of how to build Devi depending on the meta. If blue 2 or 3 wide teams are the meta, you'll want to run a primarily black shell, while orange tall teams are going to be weak to an orange shell, though both will require it to be built with the cards that are leveraging wheel turns like Heat of Battle and Designated Target that the deck has become known for. If wide teams are the meta, though, I think you'll actually want to cut those in favor of single-target offensive boosters like Supercharge, since anything 4 characters or wider will cause your split-up health pool to become your greatest strength outside the card draw, and not the wheel turn. Additionally, I will say the strategy of replacing Mixmaster with Scorpulator might still be a good idea, but that will need further testing, as I didn't get to see too much of it in action due to the wider meta, meaning Scorpulator didn't die as quickly as he should have. Moving on to the meta of today, we should probably talk about where it is, and long story short, it's very wide right now, and there's several cards responsible for this. First and foremost is Crasher, and on a similar note, Blot for Abominus deck specifically. Now, I could ramble on about why these two are good, but I think Ozzy, who was on Soundwave this event, put it best when I was soliciting for talking points from the other card creators. Quote, "My Soundwave deck can usually keep pace with a slightly wider deck due to the direct damage it has. The mini cassettes usually can't one-shot opposing 5 stars, as I don't play double oranges or grenade launchers, but they can leave them in range of being finished off with direct damage. Crasher made my Magnetic Dysfunction raise and Precision Fires useless. Blot nullified my Rock Toss and minimized my Cayman Crash. Wide teams stopping wide direct damage so consistently, their Achilles heel, so to speak, is a huge shakeup," unquote. And to add to that point, both give wider teams some insulation against Metroplex and Fort Max specifically, 2 decks that have historically destroyed wider teams, as Crasher's ability negates Metro's damage and halves Fort Max, which the latter we saw put to good use in the top 8 match between Vangelis and Champion, and while Blot's ability requires a trigger to happen before it's active, it could still make a difference in the mid-game to minimize damage for when the combine of Abominus happens. That being said, and this is just a bit of a tangent, but I think it's relevant here, I still think Metroplex can compete in this environment just because of the tapping part of his bot mode, but you'll need to know what you're doing when building the deck to use him effectively, and if you're looking to learn the deck, there's plenty of Metroplex gameplay from the OI over on the Live Archive channel you can watch, and I'm sure Ozzy would be more than happy to help you understand Metroplex theory over on the community Discord. Both of those are linked in the description, as always. So moving back to other standout cards I'd like to point out, First up is Bandit Junkions. Even back in the alpha stage, this deck was hyped up as one of the strongest things to come out of Wave 8, and while only one Bandit deck showed up in the event, it did make top cut, although it did fall to 5-wide good stuff in top 8. I've talked about before why this deck has been so hyped, but to quickly recap, it has one of the most underrated archetypal support cards in Papa Wheelie, while them being Bandit offers them Dare to be Stupid, one of the most conditionally powerful defensive tools in the game, Decelerator Laser, which is a mini version of Belligerence, and Rummage and Scrap Heap are fantastic force multipliers. On top of that, it's able to fit into the wide meta since Grease Stain, Rummage, Scrap Heap, and RC add up to 24 stars, with there being room for Queen of the Junkyard. I should mention, though, that the likely culprit for not seeing more Bandit decks present was likely due to the lack of experience with stations, but as the season progresses, that'll likely become less and less of an issue. Speaking of Grease Stain, Ozzy actually used him as the 4th character in his Soundwave deck, primarily because of his 4-11-2 stat line in alt mode, which some of you may recognize as the same stat line as Wave 5 Fangry in alt mode, who was banned in the offseason. However, as the event went on, we all quickly realized that the move damage off the station can make or break a game on its own, and the +1 attack boost is a nice plus. We saw Ozzy use this constantly with Ravage. On top of that, if Junkions continue to rise in play, his bot mode has an anti-station effect, so don't be surprised if non-Junkion decks, I can speak, start using Grease Stain as either a filler character or a replacement for Fangry going forward. Finally, Abominus is also a team that's quickly stood out, as Abominus has turned out to be one of the most devastating combiners to be on the receiving end of. 7 base attack is par for the course, but getting Bold and Pierce simply for having upgrades on him causes his power to spiral out of control very quickly, and all of his pieces are independently good. We've already talked about Blot when Crasher was brought up. Ripper Snapper is an amazing attacker, Cutthroat allows for targeting manipulation and extra wheel turn leverage, Hunger is a great utility piece, and Sinner Twin has one of the most underrated offensive abilities in a built-in photon charge, while also complementing Cutthroat and Blot in the fact that all 3 of those guys have negation effects, a rarity in this game. And while we mainly saw Abominus used as an aggro deck, those negation effects combined with some of the other things on the team have the makings for a control version of Abominus, though the aggro build is much more straightforward at the moment and the control versions need more labbing, so only time will tell if that is able to break into the meta. So that's E1 in the books, but what does this mean going forward for Encounter 3, the next event to be standard constructed, since E2 is only even-numbered waves only? Well, we're obviously going to continue to see wire teams as players try to ensure that others can't leverage the wheel turn as much, whether that be with a synergistic team like Abominus or Bandit Junkions, or a mishmash of good 5-stars, or maybe more in like a 4-wide team that we saw with Steven's 5-wide good stuff deck of RC, Brawn, Ayuk, Night Racer, and Crasher. But even with Crasher and Blot in the format, I think Metroplex will pop back up due to his tap effect, as previously mentioned. However, Fort Max will likely fall off, as if his damage is minimized like we saw in the E1 top cut, his power decreases significantly. There is a sleeper pick, though, that might crop back up due to the wide meta, and that is the 5-wide damage reduction deck that Bretosaurus ran back in the Forbidden Encounter that used Fireflight, Vanguard, and Motormaster to stop as much damage as possible. During some post-game discussions, we discussed how Crasher could be a natural fit on the team as a replacement for Motormaster, albeit I'm not as sure that would happen necessarily because Motormaster does have a bit more of advantages against like Fort Max and stuff like that. But like if Fort Max falls off, like I just discussed, Crasher probably fits in much better. Time will tell, though. Aside from that, Bandit Junkions, Abominus, Soundwave, and an orange-leading Devastator relying on single target boost instead of the wheel turn are all likely shoo-ins for appearances, so if you plan on playing in Encounter 3, everything I just discussed are things you'll want to start testing against as soon as possible. So that is everything out of Encounter 1 that I think is worth discussing. A little bit shorter of an analysis this time, but I was able to make everything a little more succinct, just so that way people have more time to test for Encounter 3. But if you have any other thoughts on the meta, be sure to leave them in the comments, as there is still some other stuff floating around that maybe could pop up. But for now, hopefully you enjoyed what you saw here today. If you did, there's a little red button you can push down below to show that. And hopefully we will see you for both Encounter 2, Encounter 3, and also a future 2 Losers event that's going to happen in between. Those should be fun. And if you want to watch any of that live, be sure to check out the Twitch channel, which I have linked to in the description. But for now, that will do it for this video. Peace out, y'all.